The first time I ever ate white-tailed deer, I knew I had to have more of it in my life. The taste was incredible and way better than any red meat I had ever eaten before. And because I had had a hand in the processing of that deer, the experience was truly life-changing.
Aged venison.
Being directly responsible for the meat that you eat is one of the most rewarding experiences that anybody can have.
It's a good size piece of meat.
And since the act of eating meat involves taking a life, I've tried to stay as deeply involved in the entire process as possible to do honor to the life that I'm taking. Hunting, butchering, and cooking are three skills that take a lifetime to get good at. And for many people, there's a high barrier of entry to learning those skills.
Jay, for real, watch it. Damn! Oh. You good? Okay.
With a little bit of know-how, maybe less than you think, and the right tools, you can be directly involved in the meat that you consume. Welcome to part 2 of processing an entire white-tailed deer. In part 1, I explained how to field dress a deer and showed you how to hang a deer for aging. Now I want to pick things up 3 days after the aging process and show you how to break the entire animal down and get it ready for the freezer. Let's go.
So, it is 2 days and 12 hours after shooting these deer, and gonna break them down. They've been hanging in the garage since that night. It's been about 30 degrees outside overnight, so things should still be in good condition. And so what I'm gonna do now is break these animals down. I think they've aged nicely. Shout out to Mr. Johnny down in North Carolina, and he suggested that I could leave the deer to age for 3 to 4 days. So it's been 3 days just about, and we're gonna break them down. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Equipment that I'm gonna be using, I've got a boning knife, Victorinox boning knife, really awesome blade. It's gonna be probably what I do the majority of my cuts with today. And then my 6-inch chef's knife, which I like to do for a lot of the, for cutting up meats and things like that. First step is to get this animal quartered into pieces, and I'll put that on the table over here. And then this will be my workstation for some of the finer work. Hey folks, I just wanted to take a break and let you know that one of the best ways to get the most out of the content on this channel is to subscribe to my newsletter. Every Sunday, I give you more depth and insight into the topics I cover on Out There JCH, including thoughts and perspectives that I don't really share on this platform. The newsletter is free to sign up, and as an incentive to becoming a subscriber, I'm offering a free wild food resource guide that will help make you a more capable harvester and home cook. Just click the link in the description to sign up. Okay, let's get back to the episode. And the first thing that I want to do is take off the forelimbs. The wild thing about all mammals, or really all animals, is like once you get the skin off, taking apart the limbs is actually really simple. All right, so we've got this shoulder here, and they're attached to the rest of the body with some of these flanking muscles here. But really, once you cut through these muscles, really everything comes off, and you can hear the meat and just the body feels a lot different because it's been sort of aging. So it's got this nice sort of like skin on top of it. So let's get started. So what I like to do with this cut is to kind of pull the limb apart and really just cut through these muscles here. And you can see how easily this is coming off. There's still a good amount of blood in here, and there you have it, right? Like that's one of the forelimbs. So, and you can see this is where the arrow exited on the other side. So massive hematoma here. So the arrow exited this side and just really kind of tore through this. So I'm glad that the shank is still intact. That's good because I love deer shanks. So I'm just going to, well, process this. But when you're bow hunting, or any type of hunting, right? The exit wounds are oftentimes going to be the area where there's the most damage, and so you're going to very likely lose a good amount of meat, and maybe have some of the bone not be in good shape. But you just do what you can. So again, just following this line here, cutting along the neck and the top, boom. And there you have it. Back straps attach to the top right at the gluteus muscles back here, and they run all the way down. And this is the prized piece of meat on most deer. I'm gonna cut off some of this fat to kind of expose some of these muscle layers. But yeah, sever the top of the back strap, and then I'm just gonna cut along the spine. You can see a little bit better. Just following that bone along the spine. There are certainly people who are much more skilled than I am and can do this in a matter of seconds. This is the first back strap I've done in a long time, and I've only done a handful of them. Not too shabby. Peeling it away. Round. There we go. Yep. Boom. And there you have it on a deer. So that's one back strap. Not too bad. And if I look at the carcass and see what's remaining, that's a little bit more than I would want, but overall not too bad. So let's get these forelimbs off of the larger buckling. So boom. There's another forelimb, and you can see just like a lot of meat on here that we're gonna want to save. I did end up washing these guys out just to kind of get some of the blood out. Okay, stiff old boy. Here we go. Okay, there we go. So you can see, the size difference in these two deer. I mean, this young buck, it's about the size of a doe. Pretty big. So I'm pleased with this. I hope that the meat doesn't taste too gamey with the males. I really don't like to eat male mammals because they're just like full of testosterone and makes the meat taste awful. But this guy, I think, is going to be pretty good. So let's get to these back straps. So that fat is not what you want. It's waxy, but I can trim that up. Oof, I don't know how butchers do this. My left hand is getting really cold. Okay, left a little bit to be desired on that one, but that's not too bad. I didn't quite follow my line the way that I should have on this side. So for this last one, let's do a better job of that. Backstrap is like the filet mignon of the deer. There is a reason why you go to school or apprentice with a butcher. It takes a lot of skill and practice to do this right. I've got a long way to go. Okay, so that was a little bit more rough. So you can see here that I should have come farther along, so more sort of on that rounded portion, and I wouldn't have left so much meat on there. So when I go to sort of trim up the carcass, then I can trim some of those pieces out. I think I'll probably take off this rib cage and not use any of this because this is the exit wound and there was rumen material there. So now's probably time for the Sawzall. Neck roast. Okay, let's get these hindquarters, or trim around the ball joint. Preserve that booty meat. It's right here. Come on. There we go. And all right. Whew, I warm up my hand. Gotta have that booty meat.
The key to getting good at this process is to take your time, and it's always going to be a learning experience. So be gentle with yourself, take your time, and keep at it.
Yes. Okay, my fingers are fucking frozen. There we go. Boom. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. That's what's up. 2 deer. Certainly not the best butcher job you're going to see, but gets the job done. I think what I want to do is get these shanks off and get those packaged up so that I can put those away. So I'm going to start with this shank because it is the most messed up. Knife here, and what I'm going to do is cut through that tendon, and you can see the bone here just kind of wrecked. But what I want to do with getting these shanks prepared is to get as close to the bone as possible so that when I actually do use the Sawzall to cut, I am minimizing the amount of bone loss, because ultimately what I want to do with these bones is to turn them into stock. So I want to like save the head of this socket, or this humerus, because what I don't want is to lose that bit, because this head has all this wonderful cartilage in it, and you can see the bone sort of sliding past here. So what I'm gonna do is try to cut through these areas and kind of, oh, there we go, weaken that bone. And I actually don't need the Sawzall for that. So let me get down to here. And I mentioned before that shank meat is probably my favorite. Okay, just cut around that. Come on then. A couple of these in a stock pot or in a crock pot is just like the best meat you've ever had. So love these. So that's cool. And what I'm going to do with this is just take off all of the meat. And I'm not going to do this here in this cold ass garage because it is cold in here. I can do that inside kind of at my leisure. But now that things have hung for a bit, I can let this sit for another day in here and not have to really worry too much about spoilage. I do want to get all of this stuff off because that's not going to be good, but otherwise should be okay. All right, boom, there we go. And see, that's like all of this is what you want to save. They're recipes for like a blade roast, so you can keep this whole and just kind of roast it. But what I really want is this humerus, because that's going to be good stock bone. And then I'm just going to trim out the scapula here and get all this meat off. And all of this meat is going to be burger. It's going to go to the grinder. I'm really looking forward to doing this enough times where it's, there it is, okay. Where it becomes like second nature, right? And again, like I said before, this is why, you know, like people go to school to learn these techniques and learn this anatomy. Like I've taught anatomy in classrooms and in labs, but you know, it's never been to this level of detail where you've needed to really kind of like know things in practice. So the skill of any person who's doing their butchery, you know, is in like how many cuts they make, right? So like me, I'm making all these cuts because so many of them are exploratory, because I don't really have a good grasp of where everything is. And even if I did, it's also a matter of like, well, can I make the right cut to separate the parts of the animal out that I want? And, you know, that just takes practice. We aren't born knowing how to do this. This video is for those of us who are learning, and to, just like let you know that it is difficult, but it's fun, and there's a lot of learning that happens along the way. And, it's just a matter of like practicing, right? Practicing, learning. So that's what we're doing here. All right, back again. I'm going to break down some more stuff. A little less talking and instruction, just kind of going to get through it because day's getting away. So here we go. Let's keep it moving. I'm finally doing this right, like pulling these muscle groups back. I cut through them on the other one, but this is the way that I should have done it because the calf muscle is fully intact. So that's upsetting. But again, live and learn. This is the job that I should have done. Clean that and get all of that done. Finally did it right.
Cutting your long bones in half serves two purposes. One, to make sure that the bones fit in the pot that you're going to use, and two, to open up the bones so that the nutritious marrow can soak into the broth. I always find it a bit tricky at the stage of cutting meat to put into the freezer to make the right length of cut so that you have a meal portion size of meat. Now we're talking about the really fun part of this entire process, where all the hard work pays off and you can begin to see how much food you're going to be able to put in your freezer. So I start with the back straps first, vacuum seal those pieces up, and then I move on to creating the cuts of meat from the shoulder that I want to turn into burger. My goal in trimming up shoulders is to get as much meat off of the scapula as possible. Not too shabby. When you make ground at home, you can control how much fat is in the final product. I like my ground to be about 20% fat. The only kind of grinding attachment you want for your stand mixer is a metal one. The key to this process is to keep your ingredients and your equipment cold. This is why you want to use a metal grinder so that you can place it in the freezer or the fridge before you get started. Keeping the fat and the meat cold is important to maintain the integrity of the ground. You want your meat and fat to be half frozen before you grind it, so that the ground maintains a nice mouthfeel when you cook it. I package my ground flat to make storage more efficient and to make thawing easier. For the larger thigh muscle groups that I store as roasts, I trim them up and try to get them as flat as possible. About a third of the hindquarter muscles I trim up into chunks to make stew meat. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit more about the lessons that I learned from my first crossbow hunt. And the first is, I think I lost about 5 to 10 pounds of consumable deer through a combination of what I'd like to call rookie mistakes. The first being, I should have washed out the carcasses that evening rather than wash them out the next day. There were some portions of the animal that had blood that had kind of solidified that I didn't get rid of right away, and I ended up throwing those pieces to the scavengers because I didn't feel comfortable with putting them in the freezer and needing them for later. Another rookie mistake, and some of it was out of my control, were the results of where I placed shots on the deer. On the larger buck, I made an inaccurate shot in the gut, which caused a good portion of what I could have used on that animal to be spoiled with ruminant juices that I also didn't wash out that evening. With the younger buck, it was simply an unlucky placement of the shot where the exit wound shattered the humerus and ulna portion of that deer. Now, that's one of those things that's just going to happen when you hunt. The shot, in terms of killing the deer quickly, was perfect, right through the top of the lungs and the aorta, and that deer only took about 2 minutes to expire. But what I didn't do was remove that forelimb that had that bone damage on it. And because of that, there was a lot of blood that congealed inside the armpit of the deer that I didn't remove until 3 days later, which meant that I became a little bit nervous about all that blood sitting on the meat. So, for next year, I plan to get better at placing shots so that I don't gut shoot animals, and take a little bit more time to inspect the carcass after I've removed the skin, so if there are any portions that have a lot of blood in them, I can get rid of them that evening. Another big lesson comes from the fatigue that I felt in processing 2 deer at the same time. I really kind of planned my hunting schedule so that I was rushed at the end. And the day that I got those 2 deer was the last day that I could have hunted. And so because of that, I felt pressure to harvest 2 deer at once. So for this year, I plan to get out sooner, right about when the season opens, and harvest only 1 deer at a time. That way I can give that 1 deer as much attention as possible and not have to rush through getting everything broken down and into the freezer. The last improvement that I'd like to make for this upcoming deer season and subsequent seasons is to set up my garage space so that I'm not working in a corner of the garage where I'm worried about, if I have to spray the carcasses down, getting other things covered in deer blood and water. And so this is going to be a big project of essentially doing a small-ish scale remodel of our garage space so that I can hang the deer directly over the drain in the garage and just have a better setup with everything that I need so I can work more efficiently. But this is one of the things that I love about Wild Foods and doing as much of the food processing yourself as you can. It really forces you to think about the logistics and the equipment that you need so that you can work really efficiently to make high quality food. All in all, I think my first crossbow season in Michigan was a pretty good success. I took things down to the wire and hunted on the second to last day I could, but nearly 50 pounds of deer meat in the freezer is nothing to sneeze at. My advice for anybody who's thinking about going all the way from the field to the freezer and being involved in every step in between is to be action oriented. Get out there and commit to the journey, no matter how small the step is. All right, thanks for watching and good luck this upcoming deer season. And I'll see you next time on
Gotta have that booty meat.